lectures. I'm so glad. It was a little windy. Is it still working? It was a little windy on the way in, but the weather is so much better than it was 2 weeks ago. So there's hope. It's January, and January is membership renewal time. We'll take it any time during the year, but this is the year we aim for, month we aim for. So if you haven't sent in your dues, they're what help pay for all this good stuff that goes on. We would appreciate it. Let me reiterate, any personal questions at the end, we are supposed to go to the back so that people can ask us questions. Notice the red cones. That means don't even think about it. Because all this equipment costs a lot of money. We don't want you to get hurt, and we certainly don't want the equipment to get broken. You can tell that tonight's program is a change of format. We have a panel of presenters. One of them just found out she's sitting up here as she came in the door.
Right into the fire.
Right into the fire. I'm Sharon Stewart. This is Dick Olson. This is Melissa DiNino and Karen Maki. And they'll be speaking not in that order. We're going to each address a different stage of the history about Washburn's first bank, our topic. And I'm greeting you because I'm first up. And I'm also apologizing in advance because the bulk of my information is directly from the chapter about the first bank. It was in our newly released book, The Spirit of Washburn, so if you've read it, it will all seem very familiar and it'll help you remember it later. But I'm going to sing. 3 banks mark the early days of Washburn. In 1887, the Bank of Washburn was first, and it opened in an apartment in the imposing City Hall building that was at the corner of Bayfield Street and First Avenue East, where the Washburn Forest Ranger building is now, across from the ironworks. That City Hall was a large and imposing brownstone building that housed City Hall offices, fire wagons, and among other offices, the Bank of Washburn. The brownstone storefront across from the Washburn Hotel, where Veterans Park is now, and next to the dentist's office, to the right if you're looking at them from the front, takes pride, and I want to make sure you know it, because they take pride that they were the first bank built to be a bank in Washburn. So they think of themselves as the first bank. They opened, though, 2 years later in 1889. And then the third one is Northern State Bank, which opened in September 1895. That brownstone building was torn down when Bayfield Street was realigned by the Works Progress Administration in the middle of the 1930s. Their stone was reused to expand our present City Hall. So the front of the City Hall is brick, and the back is brownstone from Northern State Bank. It struck me as I was writing all this that all these years later, Washburn still has 3 banks. Interesting. If you go to one of them, you forget about the other. There are 3. But this presentation is about the Bank of Washburn. After opening in City Hall in 1887, they built what is now the western part of the Washburn Cultural Center. It didn't look like it does today. It was narrower. And they built that as their permanent home. A huge fire that consumed a whole block of businesses the year before led to this decision to use brownstone from the nearby Houghton Quarry as the primary construction material. A Madison firm with offices in Ashland designed the elegant, Romanesque brownstone building, and it was completed in less than a year for a total cost of, wait for it, $25,000. Could you build a garage for $25,000? No. On New Year's Day, 1891, the bank moved from their City Hall office to their magnificent new quarters on the first floor of the building. The upper floors were rented out for use as professional offices.
Sharon,
Yeah,
we can hear you just fine in the back if your microphone's right by your mouth. But we-
thank you.
Thank you.
Got it. If I get the things right. The founder of the Bank of Washburn was A.C. Probert. In addition to being bank president and primary shareholder, Probert established the Washburn Electric Power and Light in 1891 to provide streetlights at 20 locations throughout the city. He served as agent for the Bayland Improvement Company, promoting the Washburn Brewing Company and the Washburn Manufacturing Company. And he established banks in Shell Lake and Prescott. Probert was elected chairman of the Town Board of Supervisors in April 1895. 5 months later, in October, the town treasurer had him arrested. 5 months into the job. In October, well, okay, never mind. The town treasurer had him arrested for failing to provide security for town funds deposited with his banks. He fixed the accounts. Then his banks in Shell Lake and Prescott were declared insolvent. In November 1895, he was arrested, posted bond, and returned to Washburn. The following April, he was re-elected town chairman. Too many parallels. He was arraigned for embezzling $1,500 from the Bank of Lodi. His first trial began in June, but the jury was dismissed due to evidence of jury tampering. The second jury was discharged when they could not reach a verdict. In July 1896, a third jury found him guilty after 10 minutes of deliberation, and he was incarcerated at the state prison in Waupun. He was released 2 years later in September 1898, and he returned to Washburn. By the next year, Dr. Probert was in Niles, Michigan, selling local doctors the right to be on the visiting. Don't you want to be on the visiting staff of St. Luke's Hospital? Just buy this certificate and you're in. Next, he started banks in Indiana. Then he returned to his medical scam in Chicago. Later, he has reported on the West Coast in Oregon, in California, and Colorado, finally settling into banking in Taos, New Mexico. Due to irregularities discovered by the bank examiner, he was sentenced to 6 to 8 years in prison in 1912. He appealed the decision to the state Supreme Court, and a new trial was ordered. There was no record of the new trial or that he ever went to prison. His trail went cold. That, in brief, is the Probert story that I uncovered. However, stay tuned, because in just 2 weeks, Bob Macrath will report right on this stage.
And I will tell you, there's a lot of new information. Stay tuned, folks. Worse than we knew.
He has uncovered Washburn's illustrious scoundrel, A.C. Probert. Meanwhile, the Bank of Washburn continued service until it was closed in 1923 for illegal practices. A year later, the First National Bank of Washburn occupied the building from 1924 to 1954. After that, the building had a series of owners. The district attorney and the U.S. Forest Service leased the first floor, offices for a while, and later a restaurant was in the back. By the 1960s, the entire building was leased as private rooms and apartments. New owners from 1976 were successful in getting the property accepted on the National Register of Historic Places in 1980. In 1983, another owner bought the building with the expectation of developing condominiums, but he couldn't secure sufficient funds. The building went out of use in 1986. In 1991, the Wisconsin Historical Society listed the building as one of the state's 10 most endangered buildings. This motivated Skip Ungroat, a Washburn native living in Ann Arbor, Michigan, to invest, along with generous community contributions, with the mission that the building would, quote, teach children and adults about how the forefathers of Washburn lived, worked, and played. The renovation cost exceeded more than $25,000, this time $900,000, and added a lot of square footage and amenities to the building. We have restrooms and elevators and good safe stairways and lots of extra space. The grand opening of the Washburn Museum and Cultural Center was in July 1993. Karen and Bill Maki owned the building for a while, and Karen is here to tell us about their time in the building.
Can you hear me? I hope I'm loud enough. It doesn't sound loud up here, but
It is, so talked right into it.
I'm trying, Sharon. I was laughing because I came in with a cold, so everybody, I try to say stay away from me tonight, but the cold came on this morning, and I think I can deliver some stories. First of all, I looked at Sharon's notes. They were all printed on the computer. Dick's notes were from before and maybe added on to Dick, and they're all printed out beautifully, and he said, oh, I still have mine from last May. So the other day, I go, I think I better write some new notes because I threw mine away. So on this side, I wrote them with my terrible handwriting. And then I couldn't find another piece of paper, so I switched it over and I printed it on the other side. So the printing is just as bad as my writing. And I was thinking, it's kind of like the way I am, you know? Just things sort of happen. And I'm actually thrilled to see the people that I know here. When we had this in May, I hadn't done any public speaking for quite a while, and it was quite a challenge. I haven't been in front of people, and I loved it, but I never expected to do it ever again. And when Dick said, you know, you're on, I go, what do you mean? Well, remember months ago we talked about this or something. I go, really? Okay. So I'm thrilled to do this. And when you leave, I have photos of the building on the back table and how we got on the National Register. And there's a little night light there that many people already own in Washburn. And they're sold, I think about 30 years ago or so at the museum. And then there were, I think, were there plates that were sold also at the museum, or is it just the high school?
High school.
The high school only on the plates, okay. So we feel quite close to Washburn because we moved here in '66 from, my husband and I are from Ironwood. And when we moved here, we built our home south of Washburn with the high school boys out of the Ore Dock. And I'm quite proud of my husband for having done this. It took only 4 years just to get the roof on, but you know, I didn't know that, and I was only 24, so you know how you are at 24. So here's the story. Bill and I bought the building in 1890. He wanted to buy houses in Washburn for rentals, and I said, oh, look at that, building's for sale. So when we went into it, it was fairly rough shape. There were 3 apartments on the first floor, and the bank walk-in safe was on the first apartment. And then in the back, I think before we bought the building, there was a restaurant in the back of the first floor, the third apartment on the first floor. And then on the second floor, there were 2 big apartments. In the third floor, there were 5 rooms. And the 5 rooms are men that probably didn't have anywhere else to live. It was a room, and then they shared bathrooms on the first floor and the third floor. So it was quite an interesting rental, 11 rentals. So, and the only reason that we sold it was my husband's job took us to Hudson, Minneapolis, and so we were gone for 13 years. But before that, we probably would have kept it on for a while and decided what to do with it. I'm kind of looking at the pictures here. Those are pretty cool. Other than that, let's see. Okay, they're talking about the apartments and okay, on the third floor, the men, none of them had checking accounts, so it was like $50 a month rent. So that's kind of showing you that they were quite destitute to have just a room and all that, but I liked them, and I think I kind of felt as I had been a teacher that I was just taking care of some more kids and students. You know how you feel as a teacher. You know, you teach skiing and you teach things. When I was a substitute teacher, I'd get dry here and have to take their drink. Okay, and when we had to leave for my husband's job, it went from LSDP to NSP, which is now Excel. We left for Hudson, and at that point, it was very difficult to take care of these rentals because we were so far away. So we had a manager, and then Noel Meyer approached us and said, can I buy this on a land contract? And we said yes. And he tried to make them into condos. You brought some of that up, Sharon. And the condos didn't work out really well. He tried to get one done so somebody maybe in Minneapolis would have a place. And that was kind of sad. But Skip Ungrove came to the rescue, and he bought the building from him and did all this wonderful renovation. So that was good news. Okay, I have a little more to go. I'm looking at the printed page. Okay. Well then, when we got back here in retirement, there's Dora Kling, who said, I think we should do the first floor into a gallery. And she had all this vision with friends of the museum, and it was quite nice. And Dora's in the front row tonight. Thanks for coming, Dora. And we did things in the museum. I joined the friends. And we had little chili meals upstairs for the Christmas boutiques. And people like Allison Hudson and Mary Hudson, and let me think what else is on my paper here. We all kind of were a small group that did things for the museum, which was kind of nice for me to come back and have that connection. Let's see, anything, but I think the one thing is Dora was very instrumental in pushing shows and getting the space used, which really makes Washburn quite unique to have a gorgeous space for a wonderful gallery. We're very, very lucky. I remember Lori Otis doing cookbooks, little folded cookbooks that were wonderful too. I don't know, any of you own any of those cookbooks from Lori Otis? Anyway, I've used them, so it's wonderful. And then the most recent managers, Steve, who's not here tonight, and then Aaron, who's not here tonight, kind of held on. And you're here tonight. And so that's good. Let me see what other I say. Oh, okay. Well, I think I'm getting close. With my cold, I'm going to have to leave early.
Wait a minute. Can you explain how you got up to the third floor and second floor apartments?
Okay, there was
Because the building was narrow.
Yes, it was that stairs are in from the far. I could figure that out too after we did the remodeling. The stairs went up in the hedgehog shop, inside of there up, and then there was a metal fire escape on the far right. You can't see it here, but that was nice because the safety is a big deal. Oh, and the garage. Oh, that was old then. I mean, I look at it and go, I can't believe it, it's still here. It just shows you if you put a good roof on it, lasts longer. And Dick Olson, you were a big part of the remodeling and all of that. So I think that was great that you had a big part, Dick.
He's going to talk about that.
And you're going to talk about that. So, any questions? I just, you could tell that I loved being in Washburn, still love being here. I love what the museum has done for us. And another thing about museums and old buildings, I've heard some bad stories of Minneapolis tearing down beautiful old buildings and how sad that's been for people that, these buildings could have been fixed, I think, and used and appreciated. But Washburn kept it up. And any questions from that period? I feel very connected, and I was actually enjoyed. Okay, I enjoyed seeing you all. Thank you.
Pass it on to Dick.
I'm gonna stand up. I've been watching that wine glass wiggling there. I just had for the first time in my life, I was hauled to Ashland in an ambulance a week ago. And I got an intercept and intravenous and all those things, and I just thought it was something to do with my left ear and vertigo. But I happened to look at one of my charts, and did you notice that kind of sort of skinny guy, not skinny, but in that one picture, and he's wearing a vest and he's pretty good looking. But on my chart, the whole thing I learned, because you don't get an answer much out of the doctors, on my chart I was listed as a well-nourished male. Now I can claim I'm not obese. Yeah. Anyway, Steve Cawthorman couldn't be here tonight because he's had a little surgery last week and something he wasn't feeling really good. So that last sentence was sort of a fill-in because we need to broaden this out a bit. Anyway, I'm going to go right off the teleprompter here from now on, and I'm going to repeat some things that have already been said, but they're from my viewpoint, so they really matter. And this is my go at it. The restoration of the old 1890 bank building. The 1890 bank building was home to the Washburn State Bank, which in 1955 moved to a new building, the present Bremer Bank, and soon to be the old National Bank, if you all have heard. Most recent owners of the old bank building included Ray Devine, Don and Viv Brenholt, and then for 7 years, starting in 1976, Bill and Karen Maki, all of whom provided it as apartments of various kinds. A side note, in the 1960s, Mrs. Harris operated a restaurant in the first floor back room, which was A.C. Probert's office. Then in 1983, Noel Meyer purchased the building from the Makis and was pursuing his own ideas for its use, which you heard some of those from Karen. Sometime in the 1980s, Paul Ungroth, Sr., with his wife Alice, moved back to Washburn from Michigan to retire. He was at one time, in his 20s, Washburn's youngest mayor. Even in retirement, he was active in city affairs such as Chamber of Commerce, etc. I remember going to Chamber of Commerce annual meetings, and Paul was in his late 80s, early 90s, and he would be coming up with ideas from the back row. Anyway, while eating at the Timeout Cafe, he would look across at Bayfield Street at the old bank building and started having some thoughts of what to do with it. I remember Paul talking to my father, Dick Olson Sr., about getting some rough estimates of needed repairs, such as roof, windows, doors, plumbing, heating, etc. And here I'm going to insert some new history that I recently learned with the great help of Susan McGrath from the Washburn Historical Society and also a Cultural Center board member. 2 weeks ago, she and I were going through the pictures that you're now looking at of the old bank building, and these pictures are just going around at random. We're not talking about the pictures. You're going to make your own inferences from them, and if you have any questions after the service, I mean, after the that's a different microphone. Anyway, after the presentation, you're more than happy to go over with you. Okay. I remember Paul talking to my father to get those ideas. Here I'm going to insert some new history that I recently learned with the great help of Susan McGrath from the Washburn Historical Society, and she's a member of our board. 2 weeks ago, she and I were going through pictures of the old bank building and discovered a set of renovation plans for the building drawn by Don Statanius, an architect from Duluth, dated November of 1976. And I just sort of went, wow, not that I was ever a part of the early thoughts of the building, but that was trying to discover where those thoughts were brewed and how they came up. I just said, wow. The drawings were of a museum and a gift shop, complete with 2 stairwells and an elevator, very similar to what we have now, but on a slightly smaller scale. There was no mention on these plans of who they were designed for. I left and wondered. Susan kept researching, and a day or two later she called me, and she found an article in the Washburn Times of that week, sometime in November of that year, explaining that the Washburn Area Industrial Development Corporation had asked the city of Washburn to support and approve and seek a grant of $800,000 to renovate the old bank building. The article had no more info, so I just assumed the grant never came to fruition. The development corporation was owned by public stockholders and was led by local business leaders to facilitate growth and jobs in Washburn. The Washburn Foundry was their first success. Now back to the story of the building. Paul Ungrove's son, Paul Skip Jr., would come to Washburn every summer for the Ungrove family revival, or reunion, as they might call it. And I think other things beyond revival and reunion went on, but at the family retreat near Houghton. I assume that in 1989 or 1990, Paul Sr. put an idea in Skip's head about the old bank. Skip had already been a large part of several historical renovation projects in his home state of Michigan. While here, probably in the summer of 1990, Skip recruits local talent, like the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, the lawyer, the banker, the lumberman, the historians, and musicians too. The first priority seemed to be the purchase of the building from Noel Meyer, who was about to sell the brownstone to a Minneapolis salvage company. Skip personally purchased the building from Noel for approximately $25,000. The next priority was to gather and form a committee to work on the idea. That committee was made up of locals and one or two of Skip's friends. I am one of the original members, as are Marion Jonas, Neil Fry, and others included Ruth Harnoys, Tom Lindsay, Dick Scamper, and Ted Root. The committee eventually became the board of directors of the Washburn Area Historical Museum and Cultural Center, which is our real name, doing business today as the Washburn Cultural Center, or WCC. Here's a list of things we deemed that needed to be accomplished. First, how to fund this idea. Where the money in Washburn was and is, nobody ever knows. Nobody ever knew or knows still. But Skip persevered and called a meeting or two or three or four. Second, what was our purpose to be? The Washburn Historical Association would operate the museum on the second floor. The first floor would be a gift shop and an area for meetings and events. The third floor would be a hands-on children's museum. A new garage would be attached to the north end of the back alley side as a transportation museum. The third thing we did was hire Steve Schroffnagel of C&S Design to draw and design some perspective ideas and produce some estimates of cost. But fundraising remained the biggest issue. Next, I'm going to read a reading by Gary Hohen of about that time. The Cultural Center and Museum, circa 1993, by Gary Hohen. The old bank of San Brownstone once stood. Said Noel Meyer, I wish that I could do my community duty and rehab this beauty, but my bank rolls like a stove out of wood. Then Skip Ungrove got a burr in his shorts, had a vision of grandeur by reports, pried considerable loot from some folks, and to boot from his rel's got some more. They're good sports. Now the fine 1890 old bank, number one in the historic rank, has been saved from the fall for the use of us all, and we have Skip and his family to thank. There are others whose names now appear on the wall plaque whose helps not obscure. They are planners and schemers, workers and donors, and dreamers that have filled the old brownstone with cheer. I don't think that the fight has been won. There's still a big hole in the fund. If you have some booty, step forth, do your duty. Give a gob so the job can get done. Gary's there.
Yeah, with his head down.
I missed one word there, Gary. The plan that C&S Design presented had a new addition on the north side with 2 stairwells and an elevator that served all 4 floors with new bathrooms and a utility room on the basement level. A gallery on the first floor, more museum space on the second floor, and an open mezzanine on the 4th level. Skip and the new committee started fundraising. Skip hits up friends, the Washburn Historical Association kicks in, and some local money was raised. Eventually enough to start demolition, reconstruction, and the new addition. Over a couple of years of Skip's involvement, we get to have a grand opening, which Sharon alluded to. Did you allude to the grand opening?
I did, because we moved to town that week.
Yeah.
It was cool.
I didn't know how much data about that, but you covered that good. I think we actually, Skip hired a cruise boat. We all took a cruise and drank some wine and told stories.
Sweet.
At one point in time of fundraising. We get to have a grand opening with carpet on 2 floors and 2 restrooms on the lower level, which was not yet finished. The 3rd floor was not yet finished, and most important to me was the fact that the roof was still the original one from 1980. At every meeting, I would just quietly say, roof, roof. Building is a roof, and Skip didn't know that. We had a company called Restoration Inc. from Minneapolis do a complete tuck pointing and sealing of all the exterior brownstone. Then comes the obelisk. Skip was a proponent of brownstone. Our building, others near us, and the brownstone quarries near the Ungrove cabin, and the fact that the city had started celebrating brownstone days all contributed to Skip's idea of building an obelisk in the garden spot on the northeast corner of the outside of the building. Skip had read or heard about the huge monolith that was to be removed from one of the quarries for the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago. The brownstone monolith never made it out of the quarry. Dean Dufek was hired. He was a local stonemason and constructed the obelisk as it is now using sandstone salvaged from an old stair on the west side, found under the sidewalk on the west side of the building when we excavated. I was happy about the obelisk, but I was still going roof, roof. During the 12 years or so of Skip's leading us through construction and dusting us with personal donations, the most famous job site saying was, Skip's coming. He would show up every 2 or 3 months by car or by airplane and push us forward. He and his sidekick, Jenny, would give us a week or 2 notice of their arrival time, and the tradesmen and the local board members would spring into action because Skip was a-coming. Speaking of tradesmen, all of them were pretty much local carpenters, masons, electricians, plumbers, and heating professionals. Skip passed away on January 12, 2003 at the age of 72, but he and members of the Ungrove family, like Hugo, left us with an endowment fund which has carried us to the present. It has had its ups and downs and has been added to by others, but it has kept the heat and lights on. I could start by naming all the people who have served on the Cultural Center board and the people who have been our great directors and managers, but I'm not going to. Unfortunately, to declutter my life when I retired from Olson Building Materials, I threw all of my Cultural Center files and info away. And that, Susan DeCrest said I should have kept that. There might have been things in there nobody should have ever read. One other Ungrove stands out, and that's Bob Ungrove, younger brother of Skip. He had moved from Michigan to manage Ungrove Hardware in 1986, and he became a member and president of the WCC board until his death on January 15, 2019. Well, this just came to my mind. As long as we're mentioning Ungroats, we're very fortunate to have a late model of the family, Jen Ungroat, on the Cultural Center board now. Anyway, our purpose and theme have evolved over the years, with the Historical Museum being our center of attraction. The gift shop turned into a quilt shop, a fabric shop, an antique shop, back to an art shop, back to a thrift shop, and I can't keep track of all of it. And the first floor and the third floor getting finished and becoming a meeting place, an art gallery, and a place for artistic workshops. Speaking of the roof, the original plan of Skip and the CNF design was to replace the original turned steel roof with a look-alike copper roof. I was up there in those pictures. You could see daylight through all of those boards. Why it didn't leak is only because it was steep. That steel roof, the original roof from 1890, was just full of pinholes. And it did not leak very much. It was a turned steel, which looks like copper a bit, but so Skip had done some buildings in Michigan with copper, and he was infatuated with doing this in copper. And the estimate at the time, in that early days, was $125,000. But the time we got to it, it was about $250,000 because the price of copper had gone up. And there were no real artisans around here that understood a copper roof. So in 2011 or so, we contracted and had a 100-year asphalt shingle roof installed with all copper gutters and copper flashing. So much for roof. We've been blessed with a generous annual contributing membership and many memorials over the years. I will conclude by stating that had it not been for Skip Ungroat's vision and revelations, we would be looking at an empty lot at the end of a beautiful city park. I was going to introduce Steve Kaufman tonight, but as I told you, he isn't here, to give a little view of the present, and he's recovering from a little mild surgery. But now I am thrilled to introduce somebody even more special, our new Director of Operations, Melissa DiNino, who just started January 6th.
Thank you, Dick. Yeah, I had every intention of just sneaking in and sitting in the back row for this, so I could learn alongside all of you, since I'm new to this role, and somehow I am now sitting in front with the microphone. But thank you. So yeah, my name is Melissa DiNino. I'm the new director. Again, I've been in this role for less than a month, so I'm also a new member of the community. My husband grew up in the area, and we moved here from Montana a little over a year ago. I'm a professional watercolor artist and have been working with galleries out west. So I can really appreciate the ability that art has to bring people together. Just in the short time that I've been in this role, and even living in the area, I've really enjoyed meeting and connecting with people in the community anytime I've been in the Cultural Center. But so in this current chapter of the bank building story, the Washburn Cultural Center really is the premier art space for the region and a hearth for the community to gather around. Our two entrance-level galleries showcase monthly rotating art exhibitions featuring works by local and regional artists, and the third floor provides space and opportunities for workshops and special events. And all of these spaces are also available to rent. Looking to the year ahead, our exhibition calendar for the year is really starting to come together, and I wanted to encourage all of you to come out and support the artists who are exhibiting their work. Up first will be Seabox Spring Art Show. Their theme is the art of food, and that show will be hanging in March. But there are a number of other ways to get involved at the Cultural Center. We welcome exhibition proposals from artists. If you're curious about learning a new artistic medium in a really welcoming environment, we have art groups that are open to everyone and meet weekly, such as the Monday Life Drawing Group and the Blue View Pastel Group. We also have tiny part-time staff. And so any volunteers really help increase our capacity, and whether that's assisting during gallery hours, with events, or if you want to help with gardening to help keep our historic building looking beautiful. If you're excited to volunteer, I'm just as excited to find a way to weave you into this story. There's a lot happening, so at the same time, even with everything that's already going on, I'd love to hear all of your thoughts and ideas on what you would like to see the Cultural Center offer into the future, because truly the only way any community gathering place continues to be successful is if it reflects the needs and desires of the community itself. So yeah, on that note, I just wanted to say I look forward to meeting all of you in time. And please feel to come up and chat with me, or stop into the cultural centers to say hello. But thank you.
Thank you very much. And is my mic working for the people in the back? Okay, good. And I just wanted to thank you again, and what a wonderful opportunity to see something again. We saw this, some of us saw this conversation happen at the Cultural Center in May, and there's something special about when a group does any kind of speaking, and we appreciate the fact that they came together again and that they added Melissa to their group. And when you think about all the people that it took to save and persist and not give up on that building, and there it is today. And as Dick said, it's not just an empty lot next to a beautiful park. It really is an anchor at that end of the street. And we're so thankful for those that have gone before and done the work that needed to be done, supported by people like you. So thank you for being here tonight. Remember again that the speakers will move to the back, and but we have a little bit of time, and so if you have a question that you'd like to bring up to the speakers while they're here, I can come up to you. Here's Bob.
Well, I would just like to repeat what Sharon said and invite you all to come again in 2 weeks to hear a little bit more about Mr. Probert, who was, in fact, a world-class scoundrel.
He's our scoundrel, though.
An absolute Olympic-level scoundrel. And this stuff new. I gave a program on Mr. Probert 10 years ago. Maybe some of you saw it. There's a lot more now. Some of it ripped from the pages of history, and some from the National Enquirer, I think. So be there or be square.
Thank you, Bob. We're looking forward to that. Thank you very much. Yep, nothing like a story about a scoundrel. Any other questions or comments before we say goodnight to our group? Thank you again, all of you, for coming, and let's have one more round of applause.